You've heard it before. Seeing starts with light waves bouncing off objects. Then the light waves hit your eyeballs, and the image on your retina is really upside down. But somehow your brain flops it around so you don't confuse your head with your toes. Amazing stuff, this vision. You learn that your eye takes pictures, sort of like an intelligent camera. Well, that might be how your eye works, but it doesn't explain perception.
The retina.
These explanations treat seeing as something that happens to you. This video is about perception, something you do to the world. As you look at this picture, the image on your eyeball remains unchanged. But somehow you can create two different perceptions. One of a vase, and the other profiles of two faces. Vase, faces. A camera can't do that. Here's another image you can see in at least two ways, either a duck or a rabbit. These images are not merely optical tricks. They illustrate how you perceive the world. You create what you see. In perception, you act more like an artist than a camera. And you have to learn perception. You taught yourself how to watch movies. You probably know the grammar of moving pictures better than the grammar you studied in English class. So if someone walks out of frame, you know they don't cease to exist. Your gaze doesn't keep moving past the edge of the screen. If a character drops something, you know better than to look for it beneath the screen. You learned this from experience. You were not born with this knowledge. 2-year-olds often confuse television and reality. They might touch the screen or look behind the set in search of the real person. They have yet to learn the meaning of moving images. One clue to understanding images is its frame. Frames help shape our perception of what they contain. Sometimes frames are physical and obvious, like this, or a TV screen, the border of a snapshot, the proscenium of a stage, the boxes in a cartoon or comic strip. A frame says, "Look at what I enclose." Frames also tell us how to perceive their contents. When you visit an art museum, you look at whatever is inside the frames. But the museum itself is a frame, a sort of frame for frames. These frames lead us to label the pictures as art. This soup label is inside the large frame of a supermarket and a smaller frame of a shelf of other soup cans. You look at it long enough to read the soup's name, but you don't admire it. The can sells for 59 cents, label included. But this soup label image hangs in an art museum. It's quite similar to that in the grocery store, but this is art, not soup. People come from all over the world to see it. A copy sells for over $20,000. Frames make a difference, and art costs more than soup. Not all frames are physical. Ideas can make a frame. We call it context. The ideas we bring to the image form what we call a frame of reference. This statue sat in a New York building lobby for years, and few gave it a second glance. But when an art scholar discovered it might be a valuable early work of Michelangelo, the news media fell over each other to see it. The statue did not change. Its frame changed, so people perceived it differently. Consider this Van Gogh painting called Wheatfield with Crows. Now I'm going to reframe it for you with information. I'm going to change the context. The words give the painting a new meaning, although you might find that new meaning difficult to put into words. Frames change in daily life, not just the world of art. Is this container half full or half empty. You might say, it's the same thing, merely stated two different ways. And of course, you're correct. But what if I asked you that same question now? In this context, you would probably say it's half full. And what if I changed the context like this? Now you would probably label it as half empty. Same container, different context. Or consider this truck. In this frame, it looks rather ordinary. But if we shift the frame, you realize the truck is only a toy. You thought it was real only because we hid part of the frame. Again, a change in frame leads to a change in meaning. Let's explore some other unexamined rules of perception. Perception is active and creative, not passive or mechanical. You take part in creating what you see. Consider this drawing. It's a bit like the vase we saw earlier. Some viewers see the profile of an elegant young woman. Others, a rather stern, older woman. Now, I want you to be able to see both the old and young woman. I want you to switch back and forth and see now the old woman, now the young. Try it. You are demonstrating that perception is a creative act. Here's an image that at first seems meaningless. There is no clear figure to stand out from the background. Experts would say there is a confusion between the figure and the ground. But after a while, a picture might appear. Does it? Some viewers never see a meaningful picture. But once you see the picture, you cannot not see it. The difference isn't out there. It's in the perception. We each create different perceptions. Here's a situation for you to discuss. Two people very much in love marry. 3 years later, they barely speak and seek a divorce. Each says the other has changed. You hear them say, "You're not the same person I fell in love with years ago." But their friends really don't notice any major personality change. What happened? And what does this have to do with optical illusions? The people might not have changed, but their perceptions did. That's one reason relationships are so complicated. A change in perception can have the same impact as a change in personality. These eyeglasses create a rainbow effect. Now imagine you live in a world where everyone is born with these glasses. No one has ever taken them off, not since the beginning of time. One day, you discover the glasses are removable. You are the only person ever to make this discovery. Suddenly, you see a very different world. What would happen if you tried to convince others that their world is wrong, and that only you see the world as it really is? Consider the bullfighter illusion. Many believe that the bull is enraged at the sight of the red cape, but the courageous matador manages to avoid the bull's rush at the last second. In fact, the bull is colorblind and could care less if the cape were purple polka dots. The matador knows the bull is attracted by movement, not color. As long as the cape is the moving object, he's safe. Spectators assume the bull sees as they do. It's a mistake we all make. We also mistakenly believe other people perceive as we do. But they don't. And that gets us into as much trouble as a matador who jumps around while holding his cape steady. Two people walk through the woods, a city dweller and a trained naturalist. The city dweller sees leaves and trees, but the naturalist sees a fascinating environment of immense variety. Both see the same woods, but the knowledgeable observer perceives more. Conclusion? Education is important not because of what it stuffs in your head, but because it enables you to see more. To a shepherd, each sheep is unique and different. To most of us, they all look alike. In fact, when we are unfamiliar with any group, the individuals in that group tend to all look alike. Sheep are not all the same, but our lack of knowledge prevents us from seeing the differences. Two people walk in Las Vegas at night, a modern, literate person and an Amazon native who has never seen writing. The literate person is handicapped by the sea of neon words. He has learned words must be read. They almost force themselves to be read. The illiterate tribesman has no such pressure. He sees lights, shapes, and colors. He might see the beauty through the words. The two perceive different worlds. One of your visual habits is to group experience into categories and label them. If I asked you which group of dice has the fewest members, you would probably say the one at the top, with 3. A fine answer. The answer illustrates a visual habit called the rule of proximity. We tend to place things that are closest together into groups. But we could group the dice by color, in which case the green group would be the smallest, with only 2 members. There's nothing wrong with a color-based grouping. It's just not the first one most people see. To us, snow is snow. Oh, there are varieties like powdery and wet. But to the Eskimo, these differences are so important that what we classify as snow, they see as at least 48 different things. They see more when it snows because their language can describe more. Our language shapes our perceptions. Each culture slices and dices reality its own way. Each creates different categories for reality. Arabic has thousands of words pertaining to camels. A tribe in the Philippines can distinguish among 92 kinds of rice. Even ideas like family, mother love, morality, and justice change among cultures. History is filled with conflicts between categories we've created: tribes, nations, races, religions, and ideologies. Try this experiment in category creating. Group all the objects in the room you are in now into 2 or 3 categories. Invent unique categories that can hold everything in the room. Your categories should be so unique that they have never been used as categories. Stop the program while you create categories. Afterwards, discuss how this experiment mirrors attempts to understand the world. Discuss how some categories might lead you to see the room differently. Is one method of categorizing better than the others? Stop the program now. Consider this image. Which object most attracts your attention? Obviously, the one that stands apart from the others. This image again illustrates the rule of nearness or proximity. We judge things that are close as having more in common than with similar objects that are not near. Yet all the objects here are equal. Imagine you had to make up a story about this image. You might see the lone object as a speaker addressing a crowd, or perhaps it's a ripe apple falling from the tree. In almost any story, you give that one object qualities the others do not have. And you assume all the others share traits. They are part of a grouping. Which lines go together? You see 4 groups of 2 lines each. It's equally accurate to say simply there are 8 lines, but most people see 4 groups of 2. Now if I take the same lines and add horizontal lines at the top and bottom, you no longer see those 4 groups. You see 3 incomplete boxes. This illustrates the rule of closure. We look for shapes we recognize, and if parts are missing, we fill in what's needed. Closure is another illustration that to perceive is to create. The law of closure explains that we see what we expect instead of what is really there. Read this headline. Most people fail to see that the is repeated twice. They don't see it because they fill in what's missing so it makes sense. You play this same fill-in-the-blank seeing in your perception of people as well. For example, fill in the missing word here. She is attractive, intelligent, and likable or unlikable. Or, he is handsome, tall, and flabby or muscular. Most people pick the same words. We see clusters of personality traits we believe go together. So if we see one or two, we assume the others are present as well. Yet there is no logical reason why one cannot be attractive, intelligent, and unlikable. In other words, we use closure in our perceptions of people. You see two upside-down photos here. Some might even recognize Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of